Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 4. Today we have self publishing with Bridget E. Baker, and we are so grateful to have her with us.
We're so glad you're here and can't wait to pick your brain about all things self publishing and your publishing path. But first, I want to share with everyone a little bit about you. Good news, Bridget loves her husband and all 5 of her kids most days. She has 2 yappy dogs and a bouncy dog, 6 goofy horses, more chickens than she will admit to having, and 3 demanding cats. 2 of them are rescued exotics. Every day is a battle between playing with kids, riding her horse Leo, and writing. For fun, she's decided to homeschool the 2 youngest children. That is fun. If her publication speed has slowed down, you, of course, can blame the kids and the horses. She makes cookies all the time and thinks that they should have their own food group. I would agree. In an attempt at balancing
Me
the
too.
scales between overconsumption and exertion, she kickboxes every day. You go, girl. So if you don't like her kids, her cookies, or her books, maybe just don't tell her in person. Bridget E. Baker also writes romance and women's fiction under the pen name B. E. Baker. You can grab a free full length novel from her if you sign up for her newsletter, which I totally recommend you do. Go to her website at
Yes.
www.bridgetebakerwrites.com. Welcome, Bridget.
Oh, thank you. When I went to format my last book for my ARC team, I was really tired. And my ARC team is advanced review copy team or whatever. I was really tired. So on the bio part, I just typed in Bridget loves God, her husband, her kids, and her animals. Everything else is details or something like that. And I sent it. And I forgot to update it before the book released. And I probably got 2 dozen emails from people saying, I love your bio. Everything else is details. I'm like, books are kind of about the details. I need to update that. It's true. That's pretty much my life in a nutshell. Books, kids, animals, husband, God. It's all covered.
Can we stop for just a second and talk about
Yes.
when everything else is detailed? Can you talk about how like you're living your life like that and keep that in perspective?
Yeah, so it's interesting because a lot of people will ask me because I'm also a lawyer and I'm active in my church group and I do a lot of activities and we travel and my kids all do activities. We have a lot of horse related activities and my sons went to state and diving and that kind of thing. And so people say, "How do you keep all of that balanced?" And I'm like, "I don't really keep anything balanced. We put God first and I put family second and animals third and then books come after that because it's my job. My husband's an ER doctor and spends at least half the month out of town because he works at different hospitals,
Mm.
like rural hospitals that can't find doctors. And so I'm by myself for at
Mm.
least half the month every month. I don't keep it balanced. You take like a big thing of rocks and then a big thing of water and then a big thing of sand and you say like water is the stuff you don't really have to do. It's the stuff you like, watching Netflix and stuff. And then sand is stuff that's good but not necessary. And then pebbles are things that you probably ought to do. You could live without them, and rocks are the things you can't live without. So you just add the rocks. If you add the water to the jar, nothing else fits. If you add the rocks,
Right.
then you can get in pebbles, then you can get in sand, then you can get in water, and that's what we do.
Yep. And in all of this, where does your publishing fit and how did you come to be on this path to self-publishing? Because I'm amazed how you how do you get it done? And tell us about the path and how you came to this path.
So when I finally decided to start writing, I had finished with law school and I thought, is this really what I want to do for the rest of my life? Maybe I should try writing books. I've always talked about it. And so I wrote a book and it didn't
Mm.
take me very long. It was terrible, absolutely awful. But I thought it was good. I'm like, I'm a lawyer. I'm smart. I can sit down and write a
Of
book,
course.
right? Yeah.
We understand. Yeah.
It was
Been
epically
there.
bad. About 100 paper queries with self-addressed stamped envelopes later, I was like, maybe the book is the problem. So that one got shelved, and I went and hit my craft some and circled around with another book that was also quite bad. And the third time I wrote a book, it was better. And I got agents who were interested. And I signed with an agent. And I, at the time, this was a long time ago. And at the time, I really felt that the only legitimate way to publish a book was to get an agent, and then the agent would find me a publisher. And then my book would
Mm.
be
Mhm.
published, and people would be like, "Oh, you know that J.K. Rowling? Oh, and that also that Bridget Baker? Like, this is the path." right? Like I just stay to the path and it's fine. My theme park will come up in 5 or 10 years. And so, that was the path I was on. And so I got my agent. Thank gosh, those 2 crappy books, but now the theme park is back on track. And I got my agent and we submitted my book and then it went to acquisitions and I was like, perfect, check, check. And I went to acquisitions and they came back and they were like, oh yeah, I mean, that acquiring editor really liked it, but it's not really going to fit because it doesn't fit our list. We're not really doing post-apocalyptic dystopian stuff anymore. Our list is full. And I was like, what does that mean? And my agent's, oh, that means this book's dead. Let's move on to the next one. I'm like, wait, what about my theme park? So I did that 4 more times. I wrote a book and then my agent shopped it. And actually one of them, so I say 3 more times. I wrote 8 books while I was with my agent. And then I had that first one that she had signed me for. And 5 of them got shopped and 5 of them went to acquisitions. And one of them went to acquisitions twice at 2 different places. And it was on an R&R with Abrams when I got an offer. And I thought, this is it. Except the offer that I got was pretty good. And then I sent all the stuff over that they wanted for publicity. We hadn't signed the contracts yet. And then they said, we have another book that's awfully close to this coming out on not our list, but another imprint, same publisher's list. And so we probably shouldn't push both of these. We're going to dump the resources we were going to use. So then the contract disappeared. And I was like, wait, no, my theme park. And so there were other people looking at this book. So it's no big deal. And so then we got another offer on it. And it was for like a third what that first offer was going to be. And they also wanted me to take my fantasy romance and turn it into just a romance. It was still going to have fantasy, but it was really an urban fantasy with romantic elements. And they wanted me to cut all of that and just make it a romance, like a paranormal romance. And I said, I'd have to cut like 70,000 words. It's long. It was really long. And I was like, I don't want to do that. That's not the same book. Plus it's for way less money. And I told my agent, I said, it's still on R&R. Why don't we wait? And she said, we accept this deal or we're done. And I said, but it's not a good deal. And I don't want it to be this. And that's not what the story is. And when I talked to the editor, the next book that I had in mind.
You and her are done?
Yeah.
Me and the agent, so it was an ultimatum. Okay, got it.
Yeah. And when she told me I had to take that deal or leave, and I said, we're still waiting to hear back on Abrams. And there are 3 other editors that are reading it that we haven't heard anything back on. And I made some edits that I agreed with for Abrams. And she said, yeah, I can't keep doing this. We got an actual offer. It was for 10 grand, which isn't like a ton of money. And the other one was 30 grand for 3 books. I'm like, this is not a good offer. And the other people liked the book. Anyway, so we parted paths, my agent and I. And at the time, I thought that was like the end of the world. Yeah. And so I had sent out, I don't know how many queries, and had 3 agents interested in me the first time around. This time I sent out 75 queries and got 38 full requests. So I thought, I'll have no problem getting another agent. While I was waiting to hear back on the full requests, I had sent out my queries 2 weeks before, I think. I went to a writing conference and met a lady named Elena Johnson. And she went out of her way to talk to me when I told her I had questions. And she had been traditionally published by Simon & Schuster, I think. And then she had gone indie. A couple of years later, she had some mishaps and discovered that the path can be bumpy even after you've gotten your contract and put your books out. And so she was doing quite well independently and shared her numbers with me and showed me what she was doing and told me how it had gone. And I said, oh my gosh, I have a lot of babies and that seems really hard. And my husband's gone and I don't know what to do. And finally, I don't know if this is really appropriate to this, but the honest truth of it is that I went and prayed. And I felt good about taking that first book that went to acquisitions and everybody said, we don't want dystopian. And I thought, I'm just going to put this out and see how it goes. And so I decided to try that one myself. And I thought I can always submit my stuff under a pen name. So I went ahead and put that series out. And my barometer for whether this was a success, my self-publishing experiment was, if I had that $10,000 contract I could have signed, I better make $10,000 a book on these books or it's a failure in my mind. And I had only written the first one because I wrote 8 first in series books while I was with my agent because she said, don't write a second book in a series until you've sold the first and you know what changes they'll want. So I had all these first in series books. So I put this first book out and then I released, that was September 15th and the book was marked. I put that book out and then on October 15th, I released book 2 and on November 15th, I released book 3. And my friends were all writing Christmas romances and stuff. And this was a post-apocalyptic series. So I thought I'll also write a Christmas romance because those apparently just sell themselves. So I wrote a Christmas romance, put a gosh awful cover on it. I said, Why don't covers have normal looking people instead of beautiful models? I think a normal looking person on the cover would be good. And I did a lot of things. Basically, if you had like a laundry list of all the things Bridget could do wrong, she did them all. And so I put that out in a totally different genre. And it was supposed to be a Christmas novella, and it turned into a 90,000 word novel. And it was all first person present because I didn't know what I was doing. And it did not alternate point of views. It's all from the girl's point of view. And I will just say that book is Finding Faith, and it has 3,800 five-star reviews on Amazon right now. It's fine. My prose is clean. The story's fine, but I didn't know what I was doing. I did everything wrong, and it has probably made me $100,000.
Oh my gosh.
There is room for books, and now it's been perma-free for 2 years almost. But it leads into the series that has 9 books and still makes me, I mean, it personally doesn't make me a lot of money, although I do sell obviously the audio and other versions, paperbacks and stuff. But mostly it funnels into a 9-book long series that makes me thousands of dollars every month. But what I was going to say is that at the time I put out Marked, Suppressed, and Redeemed, I spent $4,700 between August, when I decided I'm going to do this, and December 31st, between covers, editing, marketing. I tried ads on Amazon and a couple of other things. And I went into a program called Kindle Unlimited because it seemed easier and all my friends were doing that. I describe it as Netflix for books. So when they say, are you going to go wide or are you going to go into KU? I went into KU. It seemed easier. And that series made me like $2,700 or $2,800 between September and the end of the year. So to me, this is a ginormous flop. I've put out 4 books and I've lost $2,000 almost for the privilege of doing it. What the heck am I doing? This is a huge failure. I'm going to run back. But I had told all those agents that I wanted my manuscript back. I was going to pull it. I was going to do this myself. And I'm like, I have to start querying again. What is wrong with me?
Yeah.
And so then my husband sat me down and was like, listen, for years now, like 8 years, you've been writing, and everyone who asks you what you do, you just say, oh, I don't have any books out yet. And they say, I would buy your book and you don't have any books. Now you can say that you have books. This isn't a failure. And I'm like, it's a huge failure. And he said, isn't your friend offering a class on Facebook ads? And I said, yes, but I don't do that stuff. I am an artist. I create. And then they should come to me and talk to me about my theme park. And he's sure, but maybe you should try to learn about ads or just try them before you quit. The class was $1,000. And we've put $5,000 into it. Maybe throw another 1,000 on the pile and try again. And so I took this class that was another like 20 or 30 hours out of my life, or 40, I don't know, it was a while. And then I started a bunch of ads. And that January, I spent $2,700 and made almost $5,000. And I was like, okay, that's not huge, but I made like a $2,300 profit. It's enough to get me to break even. And so then I learned how to scale up. And so within a couple of months, I think by the end of that year, 2019, instead of losing money, I had turned a profit of about $40,000. So I went from, but I put out more books. So I would say on the first 4 books, I did it, 10 grand a book. But then I had put out more books at that point. And so I was like, well, is it a win? Is it a loss? 18 was my loss. That was the year that I started. 2019, I made $40,000 to $50,000 profit after my Facebook ads. And then in 2020, that was the COVID year, I decided to go out of Kindle Unlimited. So I make 40 or 50, 45 grand maybe that 2019. And in 2020, I decided to take my books wide. So there was this thing with Amazon where they didn't tell us what they were doing with the audiobooks. And I got really upset about it. One day I logged in, I had started investing my money in audiobooks. I logged in and I was like, okay, I have 147 audiobook sales. It was like the 12th of the month or something. And then I logged in 2 hours later to check something or check on an audiobook that my narrator asked me about or something. And I had 100 sales less. It was like 47 sales or something. And I'm like, what just happened? I lost 100 sales in 2 hours. What is going on?
Yeah.
And then they announced that they were batch processing returns. They usually just process them as they come in. And so I was like, 100 people in a week returned my book. And I started looking at all of their materials, and it was like, basically they were teaching people to use it like a library, which is especially good for Audible because they're getting their monthly membership. Their readers are happy, but they're not paying anyone for the audio content. So they're paying creators nothing. They're getting all the money, and the readers are like, yay, I love this library. I was ticked. And so I went in and threw a huge fit. And the long and the short is I was not the only one. All of us threw a huge fit. And a bunch of people's sales had gone way down. And then we suddenly knew why, because they were pushing all these returns. And so I pulled, as soon as they let us, we were threatening lawsuits and all kinds of stuff. And as soon as they let us pull our titles out to where they weren't exclusive anymore, and I listed them elsewhere. And I had been told by everyone that 90% of audiobooks that sold were through Audible. I will just say this, it is now 2023, but I probably only make $1,500 or $1,600 a month on my audiobooks through Audible, and I make 4,000 or 5,000 a month every month on my wide audio. So that thing that I heard that all audiobooks are sold through Audible, not mine. I don't know where they're getting that number from. So
Yeah. So where do you go to find the information that you feel will really help you on this path? It sounds like there's a huge learning curve, because not only do you have to be good at writing, but you also have to be marketing. Have you just had self-discovery on this, or trial and error, or
yeah, I met Elena Johnson and decided to try it myself.
uh-huh.
And there was a group that I also met through that conference called the Writing Gals. And they have a group on Facebook, the Writing Gals. And it's all like writing posts and stuff. And there's a whole lot of posts on there about it. But when I was brand new, I posted in that group a lot. And I would say things like, should I go into KU or should I be wide? Should I do A or should I do B? And people would weigh in on their experiences. And what I think is interesting is, even though there is a steep learning curve, there are also now a lot of books out. A lot of people have put out, indies, we write fast, have put out books
Mm-hmm.
on the topic, and then they've updated them because they get out of date pretty
Yeah.
fast. And what's interesting is that what my answer would have been in some circumstances ends up becoming quite different later, because I would have told you KU was great at the beginning. But then when I
Mm-hmm.
went wide in 2020, my income doubled in 1 year. And then the next year it went up again. And then this year it's doubled again. And I think that's possible because I am not locked into KU, or I'm getting $1 or $1.25 a book. But that's not
Right.
for everyone. If I have an author friend that says to me, Bridget, should I do KU or wide? I'll ask them a sequence of questions. And depending on how they answer that, I'll tell them where I think they ought to go. And I think the Writing Gals is a really good one, but there's another one that I use a lot. It's called 20 Books to 50K. The basic premise of that group
Okay.
was, how long does it take to make a living off of your writing? That was the number one question
Mm-hmm.
people kept asking. They would come in and say, I want to write, I have book ideas. Will this be a viable occupation? And people were saying, well, by the time I got to close to 50 books, if 50 books make however, or 20 books, if 20 books each make however much money, then you get 50,000 a year. That was like the basic gist. Obviously, there are people that can make a full-time living off of one book a year, and there are other people that can make a full-time living off of 200. So it depends on
Yeah.
the person and the books and their marketing and all that. But that was the idea. And that group is super helpful. They have a bunch of posts and they have a bunch of people that comment and weigh in. And then they have a big conference in Vegas every year. And so there's that. There are a lot of resources like that for people that are just starting out, I think, on Facebook, especially, and Facebook groups and stuff. And then there are a lot more groups that are niched down that'll focus on YA or fantasy or clean romance or steamy romance or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really think all you need to do is join those groups, comment on stuff, pay attention to the things people say, and you can do searches in there. One of my favorite groups is a group called Wide for the Win. Obviously, I'm wide and have been since 2020. And so I
Mm-hmm.
learned almost all the things that I needed to know about going wide for free in that group, from people that just shared, from people that gave information and answered questions and made posts on what was working and what wasn't. So
Sure.
I really think there's so much out there for free if you're willing to look.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. How would a writer decide if self-publishing was the best path for them? Like, how do you think a writer would decide that?
So let's say you were told, Bridget, meet me at the gym at 10 a.m. And you get to the gym at 10 a.m. and nobody's there and the door's locked. If you're the kind of person who's, oh, I sat there in my car for an hour, you should probably do traditional. If you're the kind of person who got there and was like, okay, they're not there, and you looked up their information, it doesn't have a phone number, but you have an email, and you immediately emailed them, and then you Google search them, and then when you did your Google search, you found a phone number, and you called them, and you said, hey, is Todd there? Because I got an email saying me at the gym at 10. And then you Googled the address that he sent, and then you checked to see if there was another gym named that, and you looked him up, and you were like, oh, dude, there's one 3 blocks away, maybe he's there. Or you walked around the gym 3 times, found a door on the side that was open, and he's just sitting in there not realizing the front was closed. If you troubleshoot stuff, indie's great. If you're the kind of person who's like sat there for an hour, but like the door was closed, you should look trad, because you're going to have a lot of gym doors that are locked, and you're going to be sitting there at 10 a.m. a lot. And you can be like, oh man, it was locked. And then no one will get your books. You'll be like, I'm underwater by $2,000. So I guess I'm done. Yeah, that was a failure. Okay. Bye, Felicia. So that's first of all, personality wise. But my
Okay.
second
Right.
question is this: except for a very rare few, and a very rare few, indie does not, by and large, capitalize off of a single book. So if I talk to people and they say, I
Right.
have this book idea, it's my passion project, my book of the heart, and I want everyone to be able to read it to heal from their miscarriage, for example. I've had people ask me about that.
Mhm.
And I don't think that's a book that should sit on a shelf. I think it should get out there. I think there are probably a lot of people that need a book about healing with miscarriage, right? It's not talked about as much. I think that's great. Indie's probably not your best bet. And the reason that I say that is not that you can't put it out indie. For sure you can. It's that if you have one book in you and you're not planning on writing more, it's very difficult to get exposure, to get known, and to push your series indie. And let me explain why. If you are
Okay.
self-publishing your book, you need to be able to run your own marketing. You do not have the network where you can say, I want bookstore placement on this book on shelf 3, 8 inches down, so it's at eye level or whatever. You can't do that. Your book is getting pushed to none of those places. So you don't get
Right.
any placement marketing for free, which means you're going to sell predominantly ebooks, or you're going to call a bunch of libraries and see if they will stock your book, and you'll make $1 each or something. This is how you're going to sell books, like one at a time or through ads. But if you're selling a book for $4.99, let's say, and your revenue stream on that when you're selling it is going to be $3.50. Do you know how lean your ads have to run for you to turn a profit? If you need to convert at under $3.50, you better be running some dang lean ads. And that means that the people that are getting your ads are desperate for that book. They're going to put it at the top of their TBR and they're going to buy it right now. It happens. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. If I were writing sparkly vampires and that's what everyone wanted, I mean, it can happen. I'm just saying it doesn't happen a lot. So if someone
Yeah.
tells me I have a book of my heart or I maybe want to try one book, I'd be like, maybe look for an agent and see if they can shop that book of your heart for you.
I have offered on nonfiction books for sure where people had a platform and that was the book that they needed to get out there and the information that needed to be seen. And so great. I definitely have offered on books like that. It's a good thing to recognize that, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, that it depends on the project and it also depends on you and the kind of writer you are. I think that's a big part of choosing your path, which path is best for you.
And I was at that same conference and I was literally talking to an agent who had one of my fulls and he was at the conference and he said, what happened with this? Why'd you pull it? And I said, listen, I have been sitting on 8 books with my agent, 8. And he said, you wrote 8 books in how many years? I said, 4, but I could write way faster. And he's, oh. And I said, what if I were writing 4 to 6 books a year? And I wouldn't be able to do anything with that. I would have to put those 4 to 6 books out all under different pen names. Because
Yeah.
the traditional model is really like a book a year. And he's like, I mean,
Yep.
for romance, maybe you could do 2 or 3, but you're still really going to be limited by how many they're going to put out. They're just not going to put out that many books in a year. And he's like, if that's a very slow pace for you, hybrid or indie is a better fit. And that's when I was like, I think that's what I'm going to do, because I have been putting out 6 to 8 books a year since 2018. And I have all the chaos in my life going on and still put that many out. If someone was like, oh, 1 book a year would be better for me, well, then that's another thing that tells me maybe traditional is better for you, because honest to goodness, in indie, you make your money on the series. So, and what I mean by that, I'll tell you, I have a book series called the Birch Creek Ranch. Okay. That series sells and it's sold since the beginning. I released book 1. I ran ads on that book 1. And let's say I spent $1,000 on ads. I made $2,500. So I'm making a $1,500 profit on that one book. That is really good for me. To sell a solo title where I am turning more than 1-to-1 is really good. But I make a lot more money on that book now because book 7 comes out in August. So I push ads to book 1. I don't push any ads to the other books. So instead of spending $1,000 and making $1,500 profit, I spend $1,000 and make $10,000 profit. That's better.
Right.
So the more
Yeah.
I push it, the more I make, because they're in series. If it took me 8 years to get that series out, then I'm not going to make nearly as much money. Traditional relies more on a heavy push at the beginning and product placement in stores,
Yeah.
paperback sales, and I don't have any of that. So the other thing that I will just say is that book series that was a complete failure, that Mark series that was a total flop, just for kicks, I pulled out the other day because remember it came out in 2018. And that series has made me $195,000 since 2018. And it is a viral post-apocalyptic story. So you can bet that it died in 2020. Like my sales were like, okay. So for a year and a half, I just left it there. I was like, don't even talk about Mark. Don't push it. Nobody wants it. No one wants to read about a virus.
Yeah.
Got the world. And then about beginning of 2022, middle of 2022, people started saying, oh, it's funny. You wrote this before. Okay. So now the sales on that are great. I've had a couple of book clubs on it. It makes me several thousand a month. That series, as far as I know, will continue to make me money forever because I'm indie.
Right.
When I feel like it's gotten stale, I can change the cover and change the blurb in an hour on all platforms, and I'm good to go. Now, I mean, I have to pay someone to do the cover because I'm not good at that. But once I get my new covers in, then I can change all those and I can push it all over again. And I did that with Mark. I switched from my person on the cover, like this little girl, is dystopian and it's dark. And then I switched it to butterflies. And the butterflies sell awesome right now. And I've had so many people that are like, can I buy another set of signed paperbacks now that they have the other covers? I want both, right? There are multiple revenue streams. I get money on the audio, I get money on the paperbacks, and I rebrand it and I keep pushing the crap out of that thing. Now I'm going to ride that little pony off into the sunset. It's going to keep paying my kids' college.
The great thing is that people are still enjoying it, right? They're still loving reading it. So it's awesome.
My one caveat I'll give for that is that I had hit my craft really hard, and the Marked series is my worst series. And I'm not saying that to be rude. It's not bad. I'm not embarrassed of it. The prose is clean. The story's okay. I was the worst writer that you will possibly find of Bridget or B.E. Baker when I wrote that series. So if you feel like your writing is on the wobble line, I would say hold off. Wait until you can afford another editor. Wait until you can do another pass. Read some more craft books and make sure that what you're putting out is not something that you will wish wasn't out later, because I think the vast majority of my indie friends have pulled down books. I haven't had to do that because I didn't put anything up until I was positive that it was decent. And that being said, I still almost never, when people come up to me and they're like, I want to try your books, where should I start? I'm never start with Marked. I'm like, you might enjoy Marked, but it was my first series. It's a little bumpy. So I'll send them somewhere else where I think my writing is better and I can convince them that I'm great.
So what is your process? Is you write, do you hire an editor after you, or do you do your own editing? What does your process look like that you go through?
I have always outlined before I write. So I outline first. And if I'm writing a series, which I always am because I'm indie, I outline my series. I do a series outline that each book gets its own page. And then I do a book outline that's usually about 10 handwritten pages. Once I have my book outline done and I start writing, I write my chapters. But also as I correct things, like when I had to go through and correct using the wrong word, for instance, or putting my quotation marks in the wrong place or any of that stuff, I corrected a handful of times. So I write my book. It's pretty clean for a rough draft. I revise it one time. It takes me about 80 to 100 hours to write 100,000 words. And then I revise it. That takes me about 20 hours. Once I've done that, I send it to my editor. I love her. I would call her a line editor. And then but she does a lot of typos too. But she'll also say, this seemed repetitive, or I noticed that they said this, but like 10 pages before they said that. I think these might be confusing. So she gives me a lot of stuff like that. And then once she's gotten to me with that, I integrate her edits and go through them. And then I have a team of proofers that are all English teachers. They're people that usually, they do actually, a lot of them offer paid edits, but they're on my ARC team. And so I used to have a really big ARC team that was like a couple hundred people. And I got tired of that. It was too many people to manage. So now I have an ARC team of 30 and they all send me typos. I usually get about 20 to 25 people who do take the book. And then I get a bunch of typos, like in a flurry in like a 5-day period. I correct all those typos. I upload my final file and I'm done. Now, I am obsessive about it. So readers will occasionally say, hey, I found this typo. And they'll send it to me and I'll update it and I'll re-upload it everywhere. So I am one of the authors who is like, oh, thanks for sharing. So anyway, that's my process. So I usually say that it takes me 100 to 120 hours to get a book out.
Okay. Seems pretty fast. That's amazing.
It's one of those processes that you do it so many times and you become a master at it.
I will say that a lot of my books require research. So when I decided to write about a ranch, I probably spent 40 to 60 hours doing research. One of my characters was going to be an influencer. So I tracked down a friend of mine, her sister-in-law is an influencer. So I talked to her for probably 5 to 10 hours over a couple of weeks, asking questions about how things worked. And then I sent her emails later when I had questions. And then one of my friends, their family owns a cattle ranch. And so I didn't know anything about cattle ranching. I've got the horses part covered, like what they're going to do with the horses and stuff, but I didn't know what they did at what times, how hard it was, how hard it would be for new people, how new people would be treated, that kind of stuff. And so I did a lot of research. And that doesn't go into the 120 hours, of course. Like, I'm just talking about drafting. So I actually started out writing just under Bridget E. Baker. And it wasn't until I decided to go wide in 2020 that I realized there's a book deals company called BookBub that recommends books, and they have like millions and millions of people who are signed on to BookBub. It also works like Goodreads. You can go on their platform and like review books and find your next book and recommendations and stuff. And I had applied for a lot of BookBubs before 2020, and I had gotten like one international one or something. Really, I was like, BookBub hates me. And then I found out that BookBub, understandably, prefers to send out books that are what we have been talking about as wide. The reason is that while 60 to 65% of their readers read on Amazon, the other 35 to 40% read on other platforms. They read on Nook, they read on Apple, they read on Kobo or Google Play. And so they don't like to send out deals and say, this is only available for the ones of you that we like. Like, you wouldn't want to be like, oh, I know that my son's allergic to peanuts, but here's dinner. Sorry, kiddo, go eat ramen again. They don't like to do that. So they try to send things that are peanut free, right? Like, they're trying to send things that all of their readers can enjoy. And so they preferentially choose books that are wide. So as soon as I went wide, I started getting BookBubs constantly. And what I found is that, and I'd had people telling me for years that I should split so that I could have romance and women's fiction, or just romance or just women's fiction under one name, and then my fantasy under the other name. But I have so much read across between my readers. I have a bunch of readers that say, I never read fantasy, but I tried yours and it's really good. So I feel like, for me personally, because my brand is weird crap, even under speculative fiction, like, all of my series are super weird. If you're like, oh, you write fantasy, what do you write? And people are like, werewolves, vampires, fairy, like angels and devils. And there's all these things that you say. I don't write any of that. So like, my stuff takes 30 seconds to explain. So I tell people that I write hamburgeladas. People are like, I want a burger. People are like, I want a taco. And I'm like, could I interest you in a hamburgelada? And they're like, what is that? I'm like, it's this thing that's not really a burger, but it's not really an enchilada. It's not really like a taco, but if you try it, you might like it. That's what I have to do with my ads. That's why Facebook ads work for me, because you have more time to be like, hey, let me tell you about this weird book. So for me, I liked having them all under one name, because if you can hook someone on one weird book, maybe they'll try your other one they already liked your writing. But when I went wide, I realized BookBub allows you to send one book every 30 days. And if I split my stuff into two pen names, I could send one book from each pen name every 30 days. And I probably send 10 BookBubs a year under each name. So it has allowed me to reach a lot more readers than I would have if I'd kept everything under Bridget E. Baker. You could argue that it's cleaned up my algorithms, but I have never relied on Amazon to be my buddy and show my book to people. I have never relied on anyone to do that. So I don't think I get a lot of organic traffic. I think my hamburgeladas are sold only from ads. That's my personal opinion. But if I wrote something, if I were writing something that was more easily marketable, that fit into boxes more easily, then I think it would have been great for me to split them earlier, because maybe Amazon wouldn't be trying to show my fantasy to my romance people and then thinking that my romances were no good because they tried to show them to the wrong people.
Right.
But so I don't know. I haven't worried too much about the algorithms, which is why most people do it. I've actually done it because I want more BookBubs. But my website and all that stuff is the same. I have one Facebook group and all that. So
Okay. You are a busy lady, and I just appreciate learning all of this from you. It's overwhelming for those of us who aren't as familiar with it, but wow, thanks for everything that you're sharing with us. I really appreciate it.
the nice thing is that
great.
really all of this stuff, it's like, how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. One of the things I hear all the time is that you get all of your love, let's call it, from Amazon, where they push your book and stuff for being new for 90 days. They call it the 90-day cliff. So if a book is new, Amazon will try to show it to people and see if people like it. For the first 90 days, you'll get some organic push. My books are weird, so I think I didn't ever notice that. But maybe for more marketable books, that'd be true. But for me, I didn't feel that push. But when you're wide, I honestly feel like you can pick up a book that hasn't done well at any point and start running ads to it, start doing promos on it, start having people find it. It's not like a traditional launch where my launch didn't go well, my book is dead in the water. That doesn't ever happen. You can pick up stuff later and be like, oh, hey, look, this book now just, especially with TikTok, by the way, because you can run TikToks to something, and a book that has never done well could all of a sudden take off. I've had several friends where that has happened for them. So I feel like the book industry has changed in a lot of ways. And I think people are getting more and more open-minded as well. I do think there used to be an awful lot of readers who were like, if this is an indie book, I don't think I'm going to read it because I've read a lot of bad indie books. And yes, there are bad indie books, and they're usually blanketed with lousy reviews, or they hardly have any reviews.
I had one more question for Bridget. You write more speculative kind of fiction and romance, right? That you publish.
Right.
Are there genres that you think work better as self-published, that sell better as self-published? Are there certain genres, or do you think it's across the board, anybody could, any genre works?
I think any genre, except for the one caveat I'll give is nonfiction and memoir.
Okay.
If you want to do nonfiction indie, you need to have your own platform. And you might be better off self-publishing it if you have a strong platform and a niched audience. Let's say you're a renowned horse trainer. Well, great. You can keep 70% instead of whatever. If you're going to be printing your own paperbacks and selling them at your conferences, you're probably better off self-publishing because it's going to be really easy to get those paperback copies, for instance. But by and large, if you're like, I want to put out my memoir, this crazy thing happened to me, maybe look trad. But I used to hear that all the time. Oh, that's not a good category. And when I first started indie publishing, I really looked at that. Is YA fantasy doing okay? Is YA doing okay? How would the teenagers find it? There were a lot of questions ad nauseum. I will say that children's picture books are very hard to sell if you don't have placement, because typically it's parents buying them and you need paperbacks. That's a rough sell indie. So I'm going to carve that out too. But excluding those, if we're just talking about mass market genre fiction, let's say, I had heard from a million people that women's fiction is trad. Like, you can't sell indie and women's fiction. That's just trad owned. They're book club things. They're this and that. People don't read them. Maybe that was true before 2020. Maybe. But as people bought more and more ebooks and stopped going to bookstores for every single one of their books, and now maybe they read paperbacks and they read ebooks, that got opened up a lot. And the last caveat that I will give is, if you're talking about what books will do well in Kindle Unlimited, there are probably certain genres that do much better in Kindle Unlimited than others. And if you're going to write something super weird or niche, male, female, or the gay love stories that are like male alien romance and stuff that are like in certain categories, there's a lot of audience for a lot of that stuff. Alien romance is probably a good example, just straight up on its own. There's a huge audience for alien romance. I don't write that, but a lot of people I know read it, and a lot of people I know write it. I don't think trad is doing a lot of alien romance. So I think you're probably better off doing indie, and you might be better off doing Kindle Unlimited. I haven't looked at that. But if you look at people that are consuming 2 to 3 books a day, or 5, 6, 7, 8 books a week, they can't afford to pay $9 for those. So they're going to read them, or $6 a piece. And when you look at romance, I heard this a lot. I can't tell you how many times I was told, if you're writing clean romance, your audience is 50-year-old women and up, and a lot of them are on a fixed income and they just read in Kindle Unlimited. You will not sell books for your clean romances if you leave Kindle Unlimited. They're wrong. Like, certainly there are a lot of women who are on a limited income. Some of them will buy books anyway. And there are plenty of people who buy all their books and read that. So I don't think anymore that, other than those very niched things or children's books or maybe memoirs, I don't think that's true. My women's fiction sells better than anything else. I make a lot of money on my women's fiction, and that's indie. Okay. So I don't think there really are genres that you can't sell. And frankly, if there's a big audience for alien romance on Kindle Unlimited, you might be one of the first people to put it up on Nook and Apple. And they may be like, hey, I can finally read this too. Oh, yay, I can get it on my Apple device. Or when I have gotten that on some of my fantasy stuff, I'm so happy to see this fantasy thing on my Nook or whatever. And then you're one of the few people in a competitive area because people want it. I don't know. I don't believe that anymore, that other than the things I mentioned, that things have to go indie or trad, one or the other.
Okay.
Did that answer your question? I hope it did.
Yeah, it's just really interesting. I appreciate that.
I have had a lot of people tell me, oh, I would love to go wide, but I just can't because people don't buy fantasy wide. And I'm like, oh, don't? Crap.
And so,
I need to tell my readers
so just
that they're not supposed to buy that.
So it sounds like it's an evolving, just like everything else. The whole self-publishing is evolving and changing at a pretty rapid pace. And so when are you opening your theme park?
Well, my Hamburg Chelada theme park may be ways down the road. It may take a lot for someone to buy one of my rando ideas and turn it into a theme park, but I'm thinking like 2030. I think that's a reasonable
Okay.
thing.
I'll be there.
So, maybe my grandkids will enjoy it.
That's fun.
Oh man, where can you not find me? I'm on BookBub. I'm on Goodreads. I'm on Amazon and Nook and Kobo and Apple and Google Play and Scribd, and I'm on Radish, and I'm on Readdict, and I'm on libraries. Check out Libby. Check out Overdrive. Check out Tolino's subscription. Go to any of these libraries. Call your library. They'll order them for you. My books are everywhere. And I have my audiobooks on YouTube. So if you really can't afford anything, you're going to have to listen to some ads. You can go listen to them over there. My books, where can you not find them? They're all over the place. They're like cockroaches.
That's great.
Thank you.
I just like to joke. They won't be destroyed by nuclear war. No. Yeah, but I do try to make them available anywhere to anybody who wants to read.
That's great.
So
this has been so much fun talking with you. We just really appreciate you coming to visit with us, and hopefully we can check in again and see where you are further down the road.
That sounds great. I'm going to try to keep getting more books and better books and more marketable books out. And so hopefully in another year or two, I'll have even more success to report. Maybe my theme park will be underway.
Okay, you got to let us know when that happens.